Welcome to Minnesota Legislative Report, the region's longest-running public affairs program. Legislative Report is a weekly review of activity at the state capitol featuring lawmakers from northeastern Minnesota. Most importantly, it's an opportunity for viewers to call or email their legislative questions and have them answered live on the air. Minnesota Legislative Report starts now.
Hello and welcome to Minnesota Legislative Report. I'm your host, WDSC News and Public Affairs producer Greg Grell. The Minnesota legislative session is nearing its midway point with committee deadlines looming. This is your opportunity to call with questions for the lawmakers that represent you. We have two numbers that you can use. In the local Duluth area, call 788-2844, that's a 218 number. And if you're calling from the Iron Range or other areas, dial our toll-free number, which is 1-877-307-8762. When you call, a volunteer will write down your question and we'll get to as many of those questions as time allows today. You can also email your questions. The email address is askmlr@wdsc.org. Now it's time to introduce the legislators who are joining us in the studio. Starting to my immediate left is Representative Jason Metsa, a Democrat from Virginia. Welcome.
Thank you.
Representative Erik Simonson, a Democrat from Duluth. Representative Mike Sundin, Democrat from Esko.
Thanks, Greg.
And Representative Mary Murphy, a Democrat from Hermantown. And Representative Murphy's happy to see all of you here today since we had to carry the show by ourselves last week. So, Representative Metsa, I think we'll start with you. We talked a little bit before the show, the speed of this session. Things are really moving along this legislative session. Would you agree?
It's been quick. I mean, you jump in there, and it being my first term, I thought it might be a little slower the second session with only some policy bonding issues, and it's been breakneck speed, which is a good thing. We've been trying to get a lot done for Minnesota.
Representative Murphy, as the veteran lawmaker here, would you agree that this is a session, in your mind, moving along maybe a little quicker than normal?
Well, it depends if you count that we weren't there in February. We've always been there in February before. But a lot of the things would have gotten done in February had we been there, and so the people were ready then, as soon as we got there, to get their bills in and action taken. So we've been through two deadlines now. The first deadline was last Friday, and just day before yesterday was the second deadline, and so we're right about where we should be.
Representative Sundin, tell us about those deadlines. What does that mean for policy and legislation?
Oh, the bills need to be heard at least once in committee before they move on to maybe an omnibus bill or whatever. But if they have several committees to be heard in, they have to have the first one done as of last Friday, the second one of this past Friday, and then this Friday is the third deadline for a hearing. So you have to have your bills in order and moving forward at a proper pace to make sure they hit the floor in time.
And most of the work is being done in Ways and Means, committee work is being done in Ways and Means Committee now, or a few finance committees are still meeting.
Representative Sundin?
Just back to the committee work prior to session, there was a lot of informational hearings being held before session. So when they dropped the puck, boy, we were playing right away. So.
Representative Simonson, last week Representative Murphy and I talked some about the omnibus tax bill that was passed and signed by the governor quickly on Friday, but you serve on the tax committee. I'd just like to get your opinion a little bit about that bill and what you thought of the work that was done by that bill.
You know, that first tax bill was a huge amount of work in a very short, condensed period of time. And I think that for as little time as we had, we did just an amazing amount of things that affects a huge amount of Minnesotans. So that first tax bill that we did, I think we passed it out of committee. It was over $500 million in tax cuts. When it came back from the Senate, it was around 440, I think, but still a very good bill to pass for Minnesota.
Representative Sundin, you've been championing, and there is another tax bill coming through now. You've been championing rural property tax relief this session. What's happening with this second bill that you talked about in your legislative report this week?
In the second bill, there's some of my favorite, one of my favorite issues came up. There's Moose Lake School project down there. The Moose Lake district has a very unique problem down there. 75% of the land mass is owned by nonprofits or the state government or county government, so they don't have the tax base that most other districts have, and that's going to be in that conference committee, and hopefully it'll stick, and the Moose Lake district will actually benefit by that. So.
All right, now since some of you, it's your first appearance on Legislative Report this session, I'd like to just ask about some of your priorities. And Representative Metsa, I'll start with you. What kind of have been your priorities this legislative session, and where do those stand right now?
Well, we've got a great project with the co-location language that came through in the first tax bill. We had the taxing part of it all figured out, and then now moving into the omnibus for education finance, it's kind of solidified in there and one item.
Backtrack a little bit and just talk about what the co-location is, what schools are involved that you're talking about?
So we had Mountain Iron Buell, Eveleth Gilbert, and Virginia school districts. The three school boards came to Senator Thomasoni and I after having voted locally to move forward with the idea for co-location, which actually was nothing really new except that everyone was in agreement this time. Years past, it's been talked about. I remember when I was a little kid it was talked about, so it was something, you know, at least putting the tools in place for the districts to be able to use is what we were trying to accomplish, and then let the communities decide, just like any other community in a consolidation. You know, the ultimate choice will be up to all the voters, and my vote will be equal to theirs.
So this is basically enabling legislation then? Yep. There hasn't been a decision made yet by the local community?
Yeah, no decision made, no specific location picked. That'll be up to our local school districts to work with the communities and decide all that.
Representative Sundin, what about you? What are some of the priorities you've been working on this session?
Well, a number of things in the Labor Committee, but some of the projects that we're trying to get into the bonding bill are very important to the area as well. I've got a sewer project that would have provide funds for the forced sewer main around Big Lake west of Cloquet, and then hook up Big Lake Road residents and bring all that human waste into the WLSSD system, and that triggers some money. It's about a $5 million ask, and it triggers some USDA money and some tribal contributions as well. So it's a good example of several government entities getting together and doing the right thing for the environment, for jobs, for the community. So that's one thing.
And Representative Simonson, what about you? This session, what have some of your priorities been that you've worked on?
Yeah, so we've got a number of Duluth area projects in the bonding bill, and you know, knock on wood, most of them, I think all of them are still there as of yesterday at least. We'll see what happens. But beyond that, you know, I've done a number of things. We've of course had our synthetic drugs bill that's moving through the process. That goes to Ways and Means this week, and we'll hopefully get to the floor either this week or next week. That's a good bill for all of Minnesota, and that's been a good project to work on. I've worked on some local government aid stuff, trying to do some more property tax relief for cities, and trying to get some stability built into the future in local government aid. Done some work on statewide broadband access and trying to develop a fund that will hopefully start to build out our networks across Minnesota. Gosh, there's just been a lot of things going on, but those are, you know, some of the big primary ones.
And we'll get into some of the specifics of those, I think, a little later on, because you touched on a couple of topics that I wanted to address. But I do want to remind you that this is Minnesota Legislative Report. Make a telephone call right now if you've got a question for one of our lawmakers, and we'll get them to them on the air here this afternoon. Representative Simonson, you mentioned the synthetic drugs. Of course, you chaired the special committee this past summer. Really, you did most of your work summer and fall. Talk a little bit about what is in that bill and what it would do.
Sure. So there's two primary components to that. One is focused directly on eliminating the potential for retail sales of synthetic drugs. We are trying to prohibit another last place on earth from happening anywhere in Minnesota. And we do that creatively by using the existing Board of Pharmacy for the state of Minnesota. So one big portion of the bill is focused on that. But the other big piece of the bill is targeting some more education, especially towards our middle school, high school, college age kids. You know, there's an existing education network out there now talking about drug awareness and drug abuse, but we're going to bring in this synthetic problem, and try to get some more education into the schools about that. Because one of the things that we heard as we went across Minnesota was so many people, especially parents of school-age children, don't know what synthetic drugs are or what the actual harm is. So that's the other big piece of that bill.
Now, I know one of the things that's made this such a difficult thing to tackle for the state is those changing formulas. The drugs can be slightly altered and then they don't fit under the policy anymore. How would the bill handle that problem?
So this bill, and what you're talking about, is basically changing the analog laws by adding specific compounds or ingredients into the statute, and we'll continue to do that. But this bill takes a little bit of a different approach, and it redefines the term drug, and it brings in the synthetic field to that. And it essentially says that A, it has to be not approved by the FDA, and B, it also has to, when ingested, give you the same effects as a current Schedule I drug. So we think that that's one way that, regardless of how they change the chemical formula, it will fall under the new term or the newly defined term of drug.
All right. Well, we're talking about synthetic drugs. Representative Metsa, a big issue this session has been medical marijuana. There's been a lot of, this is one of the issues where the Democratic governor isn't necessarily in agreement with many of the Democrats in the legislature about this. And I know this is an issue that you've been following closely along with Representative Moline. Talk a little bit about the medical marijuana issue and what policy the legislature is interested in establishing.
You know, I think Representative Moline's done just such a fantastic job bringing the issue to light, and you couldn't have asked for a better author for the bill. And I think, you know, right now we're passing up a good opportunity to pass some good legislation that would alleviate, you know, some symptoms that other drugs might not. And when, you know, I know the work that Representative Simonson has done, as well as, you know, important that we get a lot of these, you know, the synthetic issue. I had 3 businesses in my district that were selling synthetics, all of which followed the lead of Duluth. And so, you know, I think when you've got, in that instance, we had our local sheriffs coming in and they were very concerned and more so looking for something to do, whether it be full legalization of marijuana or medical legalization. And right now I think that Representative Moline has laid out a great case. She's been willing to compromise, and I'll look forward to hopefully seeing the executive branch you know, open up a little bit to it. And I think we've got the votes in the House to pass that, so not 100% for sure, but I think, you know, we'll move right along. So,
Would anybody else like to talk about that issue, Representative Sundin?
Yeah, there's a lot of resistance from an old mindset, you know, that the marijuana is the devil itself. But if you heard the compelling stories of people that have children that are epileptic and the good that the marijuana can do for cancer patients, I think that would change a lot of minds. We've heard all those stories. I always tell a story about an elderly woman that I met in Chisholm back in the early 80s. I was working on a project up there, and she was suffering from cancer, and she approached me and she wanted some marijuana. I said, well, I'm not in that loop, and I said, you know, I really can't help you. And I walked away feeling really bad for that woman. And my mind has been made up for, well, approximately 30 years now that if there's a benefit to this, and we should be doing that.
All right.
But on the other
Representative
hand,
Murphy, go ahead.
On the other hand, it is federal law that we would be saying disregard federal law. In this case, Minnesota will disregard federal law. And there are penalties to disregarding federal laws in various fields. And that hasn't entered the conversations at all. And there are some of us that are uncomfortable voting yes until the federal law changes.
And it looks like this debate will continue and maybe not be settled this session. So we got a call from Jean and Cook. Representative Simonson, I'll ask you this question, but others may want to respond. Jean was wondering, why was there no property tax relief in the tax bill that was just passed using some of the surplus money? Representative Simonson, can you address that?
Oh, actually, there is a fair amount of property tax relief. The second tax bill, they'll see more, which we just passed out of committee, I think, on Friday. which will probably go to the floor this week or next, I don't know for sure, but that bill contains more direct property tax relief that homeowners will probably notice a lot more than they did in the first one. But that includes direct property tax relief for property owners, it includes a renter's relief for renters, it includes a significant agricultural property tax relief program. So I think once that tax bill makes its way through and gets signed into law, that they'll see a much more obvious impact coming out of that tax bill.
And Representative Metsa?
Yeah, you know, I think one thing people are forgetting too is last year we recommitted as a state to investing in our counties, townships, and cities with local government aids. And that should have a broad impact on local, I guess, the levels that local entities would raise. And they may not be as significant as they might have been before. So I think that's one thing folks should consider as well.
All right, we've got a call from Richard in Cloquet, and he had actually two questions. One was he wanted to know what the governor's phone number is, and so I'll give him the number. Somebody nicely wrote it down for me. It is 651-201-3400. Again, that's the governor's phone number, 651-201-3400. Don't mention my name when you call him. And then he had a question about the minimum wage. And Representative Metsa, minimum wage has been an issue Democrats have been carrying this session. Richard from Cloquet is wondering, why do you want to raise the minimum wage? Why did they, as in the Democrats, want to raise the minimum wage?
Well, I think I'll speak specifically for me. You know, coming into this as a younger person, it wasn't too long ago that I was in jobs that didn't pay too much over minimum wage or that were at minimum wage. And I think when we have a service economy that's been growing, 60% of our new jobs nationwide, roughly, are from the service industry. We need to have a wage that's high enough so those people, when there's little ups and downs in the economy like there have been, at least have enough money to go home and pay their bills. And it's been many years since we've addressed it, and we don't freeze the price of groceries, we don't freeze college tuition prices, and you know, there's no point I see in freezing the minimum wage level. So I'm supporting it at $9.50 tied to inflation.
And Representative Sundin?
In regards to the minimum wage, when you pay people more, they're going to spend that money, and it gets recirculated right back into the economy. A lot of families are dependent, maybe two people in the family supporting a household on minimum wage or something close to that. And if we can raise their standard of living, they'll be less dependent on some of the social programs that are supporting those households right now. So it's a win-win when people can work their way into a dignified lifestyle rather than have to depend on someone else for it.
Representative Simonson, where does that bill stand right now? Has it made any headway in the legislature?
Well, I'm very proud to say that that bill passed off the House floor last session, and it's in conference committee. And actually, I think you sit on the conference committee, don't you? But you know, the Senate continues to be the Senate, and we'll see where it goes. But there's no reason why we shouldn't pass that bill. Since we've been talking about this for the past 16 months or however long it's been, no one has come to me and articulated a good reason why we shouldn't raise the minimum wage. And the reality is, even if we raise the minimum wage to the level we're talking about, that's not anywhere near a living wage. So by raising that wage, it's not like people are going to start socking money away in their savings account or their 401ks. As Representative Sundin said, those dollars are going to turn around and spend right back into their very own communities. So it's a good bill, and I don't know why we continue to play around and not pass this.
Representative Metsa, what some of the opposition is talking about how it might impact small businesses and small business owners who sometimes have a lot of minimum wage employees. What's your response to that?
I would say, you know, my community, for example, we've got a Walmart moving in, and Walmart for a community is kind of like a money vacuum. And I think that when you have the number of employees that a store like that, or a Target or a Kmart, all of which are in my district, you know, there's a lot more people hired at those locations than your typical mom and pop shop. And like Representative Simonson was saying, that money's going right back out into the community. So I would venture to say that overall, most of the businesses are going to see a larger share of the spending locally when people have money in their pockets to spend.
All right, thank you. You are watching Minnesota Legislative Report, and we've got time for us to answer your questions. So call one of those numbers on your screen and get a call into your representative who's here today with us. Representative Simonson, I'm going to ask you this question. Larry from Hermantown is wondering, can we use sales tax to reduce the tax on the elderly? Has there been talk in the legislature this time of the year, or this year I should say, about reducing taxes on folks who maybe are on a fixed income, having trouble making ends meet?
You know, we have done a lot of tax work in a short period of time, but I think any further discussion on any sort of tax reform is going to have to wait until next session when we get into a longer, another budget biennium. It's a good question, you know, and it's certainly a concern, but I think that the work that we have done in the last session and what we're doing on this session will have a positive impact on property taxes for everybody, you know, regardless of your age group. But you know, it's a good point, and the question still remains, and the debate is still there, you know, sales tax versus income tax, and where do we go with that?
Representative Murphy, the deadline for signing up for the MNsure health insurance program is this Monday. And of course, that was a major piece of legislation that was passed last year. And Representative Huntley is our expert on this issue, but I just like to ask you about that deadline coming up and how successful, how well you think the program is working up to this point. There was kind of some fits and starts, but I think we've reached a milestone as far as the numbers that have signed up, and the deadline is coming up now next week, so I'm sure it was a busy weekend for that website.
Yes, and they stayed open on Sunday, I understand. I think that, and they've also said that if you're in line, and they know that you're in line, they will get back to you within 2 weeks, and you will be considered on time. I think they're about, I heard on this morning, I was listening to NPR, because I didn't get the News Tribune, so I couldn't be reading the newspaper. But it wasn't delivered. Anyway, MNsure. The minute MNsure's, most of the problems have been corrected, and the outreach is continuing, however, and asking people to please sign up. And Jason has more to say than I do.
Representative Metsa?
I think, you know, I can take this way back to my grandpa's generation and maybe even his father. When we look at major changes like this for government to go through, you have Social Security and a lot of the things that FDR had worked on in his administration to put a safety net out there for people. And I think this is one of those things where we've seen as a country, #1 cause of bankruptcy, healthcare. What I would just say with it is I've had a much better reaction since November with the change in leadership at MNsure. And the constituents that have been contacting me have had a far better outcome and way of working through the process with the folks who are down the, whether it be in St. Paul. I know they have regional directors all over who are responding to constituent requests. And then I just ask Minnesotans for their patience, really. You know, when we're making a big change like this, we need to give it some time to work out the kinks. Great stuff doesn't happen overnight all the time. And I think once this gets up and running and we have a larger pool of people to draw from, it'll be looked back at as one of Minnesota's greatest accomplishments.
Representative Simonson?
You know, change is never easy for anybody, and especially a significant change, but I think it's important to remember that MNsure came about because of the Affordable Care Act, and Minnesota had a choice. We could either fall under the federal programs and follow those guidelines, or we could create our own exchange. And I think Minnesotans should be proud of the work that was done with MNsure. Yes, it started off a little bit rough, but that's fixed now, and we're moving forward. But I want to say that I cannot believe the incredible amount of people that have reached out from my district and said, you know what, after all the angst and all the discussion and all the worry, and I got through and I got my insurance plan, and it's inexpensive. And the reality is that the rates in Minnesota are the lowest rates in the country. It's a good plan, and it's going to work.
Representative Sundin, anything you'd like to add about Minnesota MNsure program?
Just to kind of piggyback on what Jason was saying, whenever there's change like this, there's a lot of worried people, and a lot of people were thinking that MNsure was going to eliminate competition and kind of drowned out some of the private providers. If you've watched television at all in the last couple of days, it's just been a bombardment of advertising from insurance companies. We've got the best health insurance. We've got the best health insurance. Now we've got companies actually competing with the ones that are enrolled in the MNsure program. So this topic has reached a boiling point, and I think we've seen some really good results here.
And competition should be good for all of us to keep those prices down, right?
That's right.
All right. Representative Metsa, the House Transportation Finance Committee recently passed a transportation bill, but does it have enough support to pass this year? It doesn't seem like there's a lot of support out there.
I would say, well, there was two bills. One went to taxes, and that was kind of our wish list bill. And I don't think any of us think that that's a reality to get through. We passed a second bill with a $50 million target that I guess has a little bit more. Well, it will probably pass the House floor, I would venture to say. And that provides some good relief in terms of, I believe it got changed to $15 million in potholes. And just kind of taking care of the basics. But I think, overall looking at transportation, I get a lot of calls from people complaining about, our roadways, and it takes dollars to invest those. A gas tax, people get leery of, and I understand why. But overall, when you add up the tax over a whole year, your average driver in greater Minnesota is paying about an extra $80 to $100 a year. But what they're getting from that is in the Constitution, there's 60 cents out of every dollar that's spent in a gas tax has to go towards roads and bridges in greater Minnesota, and that benefits people in our rural areas. So just ask them to keep an open mind moving forward, and if they've got better ideas, we'd love to hear them.
Representative Sundin, you serve on transportation policy. Are there any policy issues happening with transportation this session that people might want to know about?
Not enough.
Not enough?
Not enough. On the transportation issue, you'll see a $15 million spent for potholes here. That's one of the proposals. It's popular because it's pothole season. But moving forward, there's a very, very serious long-term problem with the transportation needs in the state of Minnesota, and they're not being met under the current financing programs. And we're going to have to take a real serious look and come up with a real good plan, and it will cost money. But what polls better than any other issue in the state of Minnesota is we want new roads, we want good roads. And what polls probably the least popular is, well, we don't want to pay for them. So, we all serve on transportation committees here, one form or another, and that's the tough question, how we're going to pay for this. But I'll be around for 10 years, and we're going to get it done. So.
Representative Murphy?
I'm going to vote for the bill, the transportation finance bill, because they accepted a bill that I had that makes Two Harbors a community signing pilot program for wayfare signing in Two Harbors. And that's something they've been working on for the last 11 years or so, and I hope it passes.
Representative Sundin, yes.
Can I ask a representative question? Isn't there some federal guidelines there that we're going to have to bend there to get that signage done?
Cooperation is a wonderful thing, Representative Sundin, and I'm sure my constituents in Two Harbors are up to it.
I'm with you on that.
Since we're talking about funding, where is the money coming from in the transportation finance bill, Representative Metsa? Is that money that's in the general fund or the gas tax, or how does that get funded?
So it's quite a wide variety. You've got your bonding, which it comes through trunk highway bonding. You've got some general fund money, and I guess the funniest term I've heard is calling the Minnesota DOT the Pentagon. They kind of run their own thing over there, and we have some similar sign issues. I'm rather jealous of Representative Murphy's ability to get the legislation she got through in the bill, because signs in any rural district are a major issue for folks trying to advertise their business in the summer. But overall, getting back to your question, a wide variety of ways, and this year I think we did $50 million in general fund was the new addition to the funding that would have been made.
Representative Simonson, this week, you mentioned this earlier also, but there was some committee work on broadband internet, and that's an issue that you seem pretty passionate about as far as bringing broadband to greater Minnesota. Why is that such an important issue in your mind?
Well, personally, I think it's a really exciting project to work on, and I'm enjoying doing that. But I just have this feeling that broadband access or access to quality broadband is really kind of the wave of our future, which really should be the wave of today. But we need it to be. What we need to do is make sure that we make proper investments in our future when it comes to broadband, because internet access is something that just about every industry that's out there depends on in one form or another. And you know, the access to the speed, of course, is dependent on the industry, but from a personal level and from a business level, from an economic development level, I think it's a good investment program. And the bill that we're trying to pass is designed to be a grant program that's focusing on areas that are either unserved or underserved, and ideally would turn around and leverage as much contributions from other sources as possible. So right now the numbers that are in the bill are not enough to do a lot with, but it's something that we can get started with, and we can start to get some data back and see how it's working.
All right. We got a call on a transportation issue from Tori, I believe it's Tori, or it might be Tom in Duluth. Are the legislators still considering the funding of a train from Duluth to Minneapolis? And I just heard recently that there was a positive study perhaps that came out. Anybody like to comment? There's three of you on transportation, so.
Might be a mic.
I think the last proposal was, didn't we approve $5 million for continue studying that NLX? And there's been one little setback since, I think it was Pine County that bailed out of that consortium. So it's moving forward, but not fast enough. On the transportation issue there, it makes a lot of sense eventually to have that train in place. But if you have a train that goes down to the metro area and you get off the train there and you have to pay a $40 cab ride to get where you need to go, it really doesn't, the math doesn't work. You know, it's not an economical answer for your transportation needs. Once the train system is complete down there, and you know, a real up and running,
and you're talking about the light rail system?
Light rail system in the metro area, then this train is going to make a lot of sense, and I'm fully behind it.
And I recalled what I saw. It was a survey that was recently done that had overwhelming positive response from folks along the line. I think was just recently released. So. Anybody else like to comment on the train? Representative Simonson, what's your opinion on the NLX high-speed train?
You know, I think it's a really good idea, but you know, Representative Sundin is exactly right. We've got to make sure that it's bringing people to a place where they can then migrate somewhere else in an economically feasible way. And the metro area is working, you know, as hard and as fast as they can to build out this light rail system. And mass transit system, but I do think it's a good idea, and I do think that a lot of people would take advantage of it. I certainly would.
Representative Murphy, Troy from Hermantown has a question about MNsure. He says, how constitutional is MNsure as far as why we are being forced to enroll, and why is there a penalty if we do not? Now, much of that was handed down by the federal government. It isn't MNsure with the penalties, but maybe you could address that issue.
I talked to Tom Huntley this week and asked him to come to this program because I said that I was not knowledgeable enough to answer all those questions. And the background on the Affordable Care Act and how it fits with MNsure, I don't have enough background to answer Troy's question. I'm sorry, Troy.
Would anybody else like to respond to that? He's just wondering about the constitutionality. That it's a federal mandate, and Minnesota's created its own exchange rather than having people go to the federal exchange. So, go ahead, Mike.
I applaud Mary for answering honestly on that. And this is the glory of this citizens legislature down here. Mary has a depth of knowledge on pensions and education that we could never match ever put together. And Erik's got experience in public safety, you know, and I have a lot of labor experience, construction experience. And Jason, what do you do? Anyway, so that's the glory of it. But we have just the depth of knowledge on all these issues is addressed within the legislature. We've got some brilliant attorneys and just a perfect mix of people to touch on every issue.
We'll hold this question of Troy's till Representative Huntley appears hopefully on our next show. Representative Murphy, Joe from Hibbing is wondering, have Common Core standards been adopted in Minnesota? I believe he's speaking to education core standards.
No, they have not. And I don't believe they are going to be, nor do I believe that they are under discussion to be believed, to be adopted.
What's the advantage or disadvantage? And maybe some of you will have, I know we don't have an education policy person here, but I'm sure education issues come up with all of your constituents. What's the advantage of the core standards? Representative Metsa, would you like to address that?
Well, I think for me, looking at it, I think our teachers do the best job of teaching, and you can have as many bureaucrats as you want telling them what to teach, how to do it. But at the end of the day, you know, iPads, bricks and mortar, none of that does the job of a good old-fashioned teacher in a classroom with students who are, they're, you know, catering specific needs to that might have needs from other students that aren't met the same way. And so I think us investing in smaller class sizes last year, paying down the, or I guess paying off now the money we borrowed from our school districts to balance the budget previous are some of the best investments we could make and some of the things that will keep us, in my mind, from adopting those core standards from a federal level.
Would anybody else like to comment about core standards? If not, we'll move along. Representative Simonson, there's a bill working its way through the House that would bar domestic abusers from keeping guns. Can you tell us a little bit about that bill and where it stands?
Right, so that bill passed out of public safety maybe last week. And Representative Schoen is the chief author on that bill, and he has done just an incredible job of trying to bring the proponents and the opponents together on this issue. Last year we had a number of bills dealing with guns, and some of those didn't go very well, but this particular bill I think is a good common sense bill. And essentially it sets up a system where if somebody is convicted, and it doesn't happen until you're convicted, but if you're convicted, then it requires you to surrender your guns, and you can either turn them over to a law enforcement agency, an FFL, or a responsible third party. So, and the idea behind it is that oftentimes, you know, the data that we have shows us that oftentimes domestic abusers, if they have access to a gun, they're far more likely to use that gun in a future incident. So, and that's what we're trying to avoid. But he has worked really hard to try to bring folks together and craft something that can be supported by just about everybody.
And I believe you said that's now passed through a committee. Is it to the House floor yet, or still in the committee system?
I think it'll come to the House floor. That's what it'll end up, but I may have to make one more stop.
Okay. Representative Murphy, Cynthia from Saginaw is wondering, is progress being made with St. Louis County regarding daycare assistance and the hourly versus weekly pay to the providers? Is that a issue that you're up to speed on?
It's an issue, but it also has to be talked over with the State Department of Human Services.
Okay.
And that's where we're bogging down.
It's an administrative issue.
Representative Metsa and I became aware of the issue through an email, I bet, from Cynthia. And we took it to the representatives from the commissioner's offices and the Department of Health or Human Services at St. Louis County. And now we have to get an answer from Human Services. And I don't know if we can, by questioning, if we can get change or not. Mm-hmm. It may take subsequent additional legislation. And if so, then it won't be done this year.
Can you address, Representative Metsa, what the issue is with this?
Yeah, so there's, I believe it was $2.40 per hour by the week that they would receive if they billed weekly, and it was $2.81 an hour if they billed by the hour. And so we kind of found it confusing that someone might be able to work the full week and get paid less than if they worked individual hours and billed them day by day. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done around it. Again, you know, when you're running into a county implementing a state program, we've seen lots of little hiccups, and you know, I have quite a few things with our county services being administered for the state where you find a disconnect. So we will continue to work on it. I haven't heard anything back that definitively say why they chose a course of action they did in that specific case. But I will outline a quick case. I received a constituent message on my cell phone, a bunch of letters they had gotten from our county DHS services, who had said that they were denied their services for not being on at their meeting on March 19th. Well, the letter they received with that was dated March 16th before they were actually in their letter. So you can see one hand isn't talking the other sometimes. And it's our job when we get that information to go try to find either a policy change that we could do through legislation, or work with the agency and hope that they're able to do it through a rules process or on their own determination.
And this might be a good time to just address issues. If a constituent does have an issue, Representative Simonson, what's the best way for them to approach a lawmaker? Timing, give people an idea of if they have an issue that they think might need addressing at the legislature, how they should approach a lawmaker, their local lawmaker.
Right, so there's a couple of things. First of all, people should never hesitate to reach out. I mean, I think I could probably speak for everybody and say that that's the number one thing that we look for is input from actual constituents. It means far more to me than a lobbyist coming in and talking, or a group from southeastern Minnesota comes in and lobbies me on an issue. I want to hear from our people. So I think number one, don't be afraid to do that. Number two, let's talk about the issue and see what the problem actually is, and then we can take a look at what our options are for trying to resolve that. And sometimes we can do it quickly and easily just by coordinating them with the right person and the right agency. Sometimes it's more complicated than that, and if it requires any sort of legislation change, that becomes clearly more complicated, and we have to take a look at, is it feasible? And if it is feasible, can we do it now, or should we wait till next session? But certainly never hesitate to reach out and ask those questions.
And Representative Murphy, during the session, you're extremely busy. Is it a good idea for somebody, if they've got idea for legislation, to maybe contact you prior to a session, not during the session? Is it harder for you to keep up with things, especially if it's a new issue during the session?
Well, if it's a new issue, we want to hear about it, but I guess we can hear about it at any time, but they can call our offices and they could give the details to our legislative assistants if we are in committee or working on the floor or something like that. Or they could put the information and copies of the information that we need to carry out, like name, address, possible phone contact numbers, that kind of thing, and the letter that they received from the department or the letter that they received from someone, a copy of that letter, so we know where to start and we know what they are reacting to in panic or whatever way they are answering. Then we have something to take. If written material, written information is especially important. And if it is a matter of something with social services, we generally need a social security number or at least the number of the caseworker or the name of the caseworker that they're working with so that we can call. But then there's a data privacy issue. And so we might not get an answer back because the county representative or the state representative can't answer a question to us. But then at least we have enough information for them to get back to the person.
Representative Sundin?
Every day, we're checking our emails, and sometimes there's in excess of 200 emails. That's probably the worst way to get a hold of me. Now, on the House website, you've got the mailing address, you've got the telephone, you've got the email address. So, if you use 2 modes of communication, that would be probably the best. What I really pay attention to is my mail. If there's a hand-written, hand-addressed envelope there, somebody took some time and they really want to communicate something to me, that's the best way to get legislators' attention, I believe.
And I agree with that.
All right, we've got about 10 minutes left, so if you've got a question for the lawmakers, get that call in now before we run out of time today. Representative Simonson, I'll address this question to you, but maybe others will have an opinion. Steve from Duluth is wondering, and we know this is a Senator Reinert issue, by the way, why are liquor store owners against Sunday sales of liquor? Would you like to address that? What are you hearing from liquor store owners?
I'd love to address that. So, here's what I did, is at the start of this session, what I wanted to do was get a really good feel about where folks in Duluth are on this issue. Because honestly, I think during all of last session and over the entire interim and up until now, if I've had 5 people reach out and say, please do this, that I think is a lot. So I sent a letter to every one of our off-sale license holders in the city of Duluth, asking them, what do you think about the issue? Tell me where you're at on it, and just give me some feedback. And to date, every single one that I've heard back from those off-sale license holders says, please do not do this. Please do not legalize sales on Sundays. And their reasoning is sound to me, because they work 6 days a week, 70, 80 hours a week, and they don't want to work on Sundays. So I take that and I combine it with what I consider to be a very limited or minimal push from the general public in my district. It's not something that I would support. But what I have supported and what I did sign on to is growler sales on Sundays. I think I can get behind that. That makes some sense to me. But honestly, within 7B, I'm not seeing this tremendous push to do this.
Representative Murphy?
I think there's another thing that most people that just think, should we be able to buy a beer on Saturday and take it home on Sunday? That's one issue. But the other issue that no one seems to be thinking about is the historical. Liquor sales in Minnesota are a regulated industry. And even any change to the sales, a Sunday liquor sale, changes not only Sunday sales liquor, but it changes the whole industry, from warehousing all the way to modern day. Every kind of, the letters that we've been getting in is saying, change this antiquated deal. Everybody can buy things on Sunday now. But it's an industry that's regulated from Prohibition time up to today. It deals with the taxes on warehousing. It deals with the taxes on the liquor. It deals with many things, and we haven't had the broad discussion. Is Minnesota ready for a different kind of delivery of services and taxes from liquor that could result in this, what people think is an easy, small change in Sunday liquor sales?
So it's more complicated than people think.
It is a very complicated issue, and anytime you talk about it over the years, it's yes and no sides, hardly any middle stuff. And the independent brewers that this seems to be coming from, or the new breweries that it seems to be coming from, they have been successful in getting significant legislation in the last 3 sessions. Maybe it's time to just take a pause a little bit before we want another significant change.
Representative Sundin.
I don't think if we open up Sundays for liquor sales throughout the state, it's going to have any tax advantage for the state of Minnesota. People aren't necessarily going to be drinking more because they can buy on Sundays. So there's argument to be made there. And I think legislators are the only people that don't get a day off. So, but you know, you have workers in these stores and delivery people that they deserve a day off as well. So,
Representative Metsa, you had something about this?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, one other piece of the pie. Mary hit quite a few of the things on her conversation here, but I think, you know, thinking about our bars and restaurants too, they have probably a significant increase in the traffic going through there. You know, people going out that maybe didn't plan ahead on Saturday, and you know, I had one constituent who was asking if I was at church all day because I opposed Sunday liquor sales, and I will say I am a church goer, but not all day on Sunday, and that I think Representative Murphy's spot on with saying take a deep breath, and nothing at the Capitol, however simple it seems, is easy to get done.
All right, we've got a couple more minutes left, and we talked earlier a little bit about the bonding bill, but I'd like to talk about with each of you in your area. Representative Metsa, is there anything in the proposed bonding bill? I understand the bonding bill will be out by the end of this week, so we'll know more about it then, but what's in the bill potentially for the Iron Range in Virginia?
So we've got the Highway 53 relocation. You know, one of the things not many people are thinking about, the snowmobile trail that connects Duluth to the Iron Range to the rest of the Arrowhead region would be cut off without the bonding bill that we've been working on to move the utilities for the city of Virginia and the bike trail and the snowmobile trail. So that's one of the items. We've got Giants Ridge with a new chalet in there, which came from the governor's office, and the IRRB in terms of requests for the local needs. We've got AEOA and Range Mental Health Center with a co-located facility in Virginia, which would do a lot to consolidate services. The Hibbing Airport, and anyone else, I apologize for if I left you out, but I think those are the front runners in my district. So
By the end of the week, you'll know what's in and what's not, and there's always negotiation right up to the last minute on that. So Representative Sundin, what about Esko and Carleton County? Is there any bonding bill measures in your area?
I certainly wish there was a few more, but it didn't materialize. We've got that forced sewer main coming through, and that's very important. But there's always next year, and there's the session isn't over until it's over. And Tony Laurie reminded me on an issue last year, we had to get this one policy issue through as a tax issue. And a lot of people were getting worried about it, and we can't do this. We got to get in. We got to get in. Tony, just calm down. He says it's not May 22nd yet. So, and it passed in an amendment through the Senate. So, no, I wish I had more, but there's always next year. We'll come back.
Representative Murphy, we talked last week, but maybe you want to refresh viewers' memories who maybe weren't watching last week, what some of the bonding issues are in the Hermantown area and your district.
Well, the main one is probably that we've been working on for the longest is NERC, Northeastern Regional Minnesota Correction Facility, and we're very hopeful that will be in. Rice Lake has a water line on East Calvary Road that is very important, and Hermantown is asking for a planning money for a wellness center for not just Hermantown, but the townships around Hermantown and along the Highway 53 corridor, and there's continued interest in that project. Proctor, I'm just trying my hardest to get the salt shed that's next to their community center and their civic building, a roof over the salt, because we don't want the water to be contaminating the streams. And there's Lake Superior College, and there's UMD, and there's buildings everywhere, and Heeper too. And so we're very happy with the idea of anything we can get, provides jobs in northeastern Minnesota, and building projects help the economy.
Representative Simonson, I know one of the issues in your district has been rebuilding Wade Stadium. Any Anything on that that you know about?
Right, so we've got Spirit Mountain is a big project, water project. Wade Stadium, of course, is hopefully still going to be in the bill when it comes out. I think it comes out on Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken, but that could change. And then the North Shore Theater downtown, which is actually in Representative Huntley's district, but those are three of our big ones. We've, of course, got some additional dollars for the port. And then as Representative Murphy said, Lake Superior College and UMD both have good projects.
So this week we'll know what's in at least the preliminary bill, and there's always Senate version, House version, conference committee, and then what the governor decides to keep in.
Right.
So it's a long road yet.
And there's forestry money in there too, and in the environment bill, or environment section, and clean water money in from the bonding bill. There's lots of things of interest to northeastern Minnesota that could be in it.
So stay tuned to find out what's in there. And just a reminder that we want to thank all of you for being here. We've absolutely run out of time, believe it or not, and we've used most of the questions that we got today, so that's good. I want to thank Representative Murphy, Representative Sundin, Representative Simonson, Representative Metsa. Thanks for being here. And I am afraid we've run out of time this week on Minnesota Legislative Report. Again, thanks to all the lawmakers who make this program possible, and thanks to everyone who called in or emailed in with their questions today. Minnesota Legislative Report will be off next week, and we'll return for our next program on Sunday, April 13th. For the crew here at WDSC TV, I'm Greg Grell. We'll see you in 2 weeks.